A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
Hey everyone, welcome back to my weird prompts. I am Korn, and I am sitting here in our living room in Jerusalem with my brother. We have got a heavy one today, something that has been on my mind since the headlines started breaking earlier this month regarding the coalition strikes.
Herman Poppleberry here. And yeah, Korn, this topic is essentially the intersection of everything I spend my late nights reading about in technical journals and intelligence briefs. Our housemate Daniel sent this over, and it is a doozy. He was asking about the absolute collapse of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps internal security. Specifically, how on earth Israel managed to bypass what was supposed to be the most hardened, paranoid counter-surveillance apparatus in the Middle East to take out high-ranking targets like Ismail Haniyeh and the others who followed.
It really is a paradox. You have a regime that is obsessed with secrecy. Think about it. They have built entire cities underground. They have air-gapped their communications. They probably check their own shadows for microphones. And yet, the precision of these strikes suggests that the perimeter was not just breached, it was virtually non-existent. Daniel's prompt really gets at the heart of this. Is it possible to be so secure that you actually become vulnerable? This is the paradox of the fortress state. When you build walls so high that you cannot see what is happening at the base of them, you have created a blind spot the size of a mountain.
That is exactly the right question. We are looking at the failure of the fortress state. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or the IRGC, uses what they call the Gararga system. These are multi-layered headquarters designed to isolate leadership from any external signals. We are talking about lead-lined rooms, signal jammers that could cook a bird mid-flight, and layers of human vetting that would make the Secret Service look relaxed. But as we saw with the Haniyeh assassination in Tehran and the subsequent hits leading up to this March 2026 crisis, all that physical hardening failed. It was not just a tactical win for Israel, it was a systemic failure of the entire Iranian counterintelligence apparatus.
And that is what we are going to dive into today. We are going to look at the technical mechanisms of counter-surveillance, the myth of the air gap, and why the IRGC obsession with internal loyalty might actually be their biggest technical weakness. This is episode 999, and we're going deep into the architecture of failure.
It is wild to think we are at episode 999. If you had told me 5 years ago we would be sitting here in Jerusalem discussing the surgical dismantling of their oil infrastructure, I would have said you were reading too many spy novels. But here we are on March 8th, 2026, and the reality is stranger than fiction.
It really is. So, Herman, let's start with this concept you mentioned earlier, the security paranoia loop. To a layman, it sounds like more security is always better. If I put 10 locks on my door, I am safer than if I have one. But in the world of high-stakes intelligence, that logic seems to break down. Why?
Because security is not just about physical barriers. It is about information flow. In a normal organization, information flows relatively freely so people can do their jobs. In the IRGC, information is a death sentence. They have created this loop where, because they are so afraid of moles, they restrict information to a tiny circle. But that circle then becomes the single point of failure. If you can flip just one person in that inner sanctum, or if you can bug just one device that enters that room, the entire multi-billion-dollar infrastructure of the bunker becomes irrelevant. You have concentrated all your value into a single, identifiable point.
Right. So the fortress actually makes the target easier to find. If you know there are only 3 places in Tehran shielded well enough for a high-level meeting, you don't have to monitor the whole city. You just have to monitor the entrances to those 3 places. It is like trying to hide a needle in a haystack, but then you put the needle inside a giant glowing neon box in the middle of the hay.
You've hit on what intelligence analysts call target narrowing. The more extreme your security measures, the more you signal to your enemy exactly where the important things are happening. If I see a motorcade with 50 armored cars and signal jamming vans, I don't need to know who is inside to know they are important. The IRGC problem is that their signature is massive. Their efforts to hide actually create a giant neon sign in the electromagnetic spectrum. They are trying to achieve absolute security through isolation, but isolation in the modern world is an illusion.
That leads us right into the first big technical point I wanted to tackle with you. The myth of the air gap. We hear this all the time in cybersecurity and physical security. People say the system is air-gapped and not connected to the internet, so it cannot be hacked. But we know that is not true anymore, especially with the level of sophistication we are seeing in 2026.
It hasn't been true since at least the Stuxnet era, which we talked about way back in the early days of the show, but in 2026 the tools are so much more sophisticated. People think of an air gap as a physical distance, but an air gap is just a challenge for a different kind of bridge. You can bridge an air gap with acoustic signals, with infrared, or most commonly through the supply chain. We have seen cases where smart light bulbs or even the vibrations of a cooling fan can be used to exfiltrate data from a room that is supposedly totally isolated.
Explain the supply chain angle for a second, because I think people imagine a Mossad agent climbing through a vent like Mission Impossible to plant a device. But the reality is probably much more corporate than that.
Much more. Think about the hardware. Even the IRGC has to buy servers, routers, and specialized medical equipment for their aging leadership. They try to buy through front companies in Dubai or Southeast Asia to hide the destination. But the intelligence agencies, specifically the Israelis and the Americans, are watching those front companies. They can intercept a shipment of, say, high-end air conditioning units destined for a bunker in Tehran. They open the crates, install a microscopic sensor or a relay device into the motherboard of the controller, and then seal it back up. The IRGC technicians scan it for explosives, they check it for basic bugs, and then they install it inside the most secure room in the country.
And now you have a listening post inside the air gap.
Precisely. And it goes beyond listening. These devices can transmit data using burst transmissions on frequencies that blend in with background noise, or they can wait for a specific trigger. In the case of the Hanya assassination, there were reports of a sophisticated AI-controlled explosive device that had been planted months in advance. It sat there, totally inert, invisible to electronic sweeps because it wasn't on. It was waiting for a specific signal, or perhaps even a facial recognition trigger from a localized camera. This is the difference between signal discipline and operational security, or OPSEC. You can have perfect signal discipline, meaning you aren't broadcasting anything. But if your OPSEC fails at the supply chain level, you are already compromised.
That is terrifying. It means the security of the room is only as good as the security of the factory where the drywall was made or the light fixtures were assembled. But I want to go deeper on the technical side. You mentioned RF signature management versus behavioral pattern analysis. This seems like a major shift in how these targets are being tracked in 2026. Can you break that down?
Sure. In the old days, you tracked a target by their radio frequency signature. You looked for their satellite phone or their encrypted radio. The IRGC got smart to that. They stopped using electronics. They went back to couriers and handwritten notes. They thought that by going low-tech, they could bypass high-tech surveillance.
But it didn't work.
No, because now we have behavioral pattern analysis powered by high-revisit satellite imagery and AI. Even if you aren't carrying a phone, your pattern of life is a signature. We are talking about synthetic aperture radar, or SAR, satellites that can see through clouds and smoke 24 hours a day. The AI can process millions of hours of footage and identify these anomalies. The way a specific set of 3 black SUVs moves through Tehran. The fact that a certain courier always stops at the same bakery before heading to a random apartment building. You don't need a signal if you can see the ripple the person makes as they move through the world. It is the physics of presence.
It is like tracking a black hole by watching the stars around it. You can't see the hole itself, but you can see everything reacting to its gravity.
That is a perfect analogy, and when you combine that with soft target intelligence, which is essentially tracking the people around the target, the bunker becomes a trap. If I know that Haniyeh's personal doctor or his favorite chef is traveling to a specific location, I don't need to find Haniyeh. I just need to follow the doctor. The IRGC tries to harden the hard target, the leader, but they can't harden every single person that leader needs to survive. They can't air gap a human being's need for food, medicine, or companionship.
This really connects to what we saw earlier this month. The coalition strikes on the Iranian oil infrastructure, which we discussed in episode 1009. That was a shift toward financial decapitation, but it relied on the same intelligence breakthroughs. They knew exactly which valves, which specific nodes in the network, would cause a systemic collapse without destroying the whole plant. That level of specificity only comes from having eyes inside.
It really does. And I think we need to address a common misconception here. A lot of people think that paranoia is a good substitute for security. You see it in the way the IRGC leadership behaves. They are constantly changing locations. They use doubles. They never sleep in the same bed twice. But paranoia is not a strategy. Paranoia is a state of mind that leads to predictable behavior. If you are constantly running, you are following a path of least resistance or a path of perceived safety.
Right, because if you are paranoid, you follow a set of random rules. But random to a human is often very patterned to a computer.
That's the point. If I tell you to pick a random number between 1 and 100, you are likely to pick 17 or 73. You aren't going to pick 2. Humans are bad at being random. The IRGC random security protocols are actually very predictable once you have enough data points. And that is what the Israelis have data. They have been collecting data on these individuals for decades. They know their habits better than their own families do.
Let's talk about the human side of this. We've talked about the security paranoia loop. When you're in a bunker and you know the enemy is targeting you, you start looking at the guy next to you. This is where the human intelligence, or HUMINT, comes in.
This is where it gets really dark, Corn. The IRGC has been undergoing these massive internal purges. We covered some of this in episode 894 when we talked about the power struggles after Khamenei. When a high-level hit happens, the first thing the regime does is arrest everyone in the security detail. They torture their own people to find the mole. They create an environment where everyone is a suspect.
Which, ironically, makes it easier for a foreign agency to recruit a mole.
You hit the nail on the head. If I am an IRGC colonel and I see my colleagues being dragged off to prison because of a security breach I had nothing to do with, my loyalty starts to evaporate. I realize that the regime is more dangerous to me than the Israelis are. At that point, a suitcase full of cash and a guaranteed exit strategy for my family looks like a lifeline, not a betrayal. The IRGC brutality creates a market for defectors. They have created a system where the insider threat is the only logical outcome of their own management style.
It is a feedback loop of instability. You purge to find the mole. The purge creates resentment. The resentment creates a new mole, which leads to more purges. It is a death spiral for an organization. But how do you secure a target when the threat is already inside the perimeter? Is there any way to actually stop that?
In a rigid hierarchy like the IRGC, it is almost impossible. Modern security theory suggests a zero-trust architecture where no one is trusted by default, even if they are inside the network. But you can't run a military or a government that way. You have to trust the person holding the gun next to you. You have to trust the person who cooks your food. The IRGC tries to solve this with ideological purity tests. But ideology is a poor shield against the reality of a failing state and a massive bribe.
So we have the physical failure of the bunkers, the technical failure of the air gaps, and the human failure of the loyalty model. This leads us to the current state of regional doctrine. We are here in March 2026. The IRGC is reeling. They have lost key leaders. Their oil money is being choked off by precision strikes, and their internal security is a mess. How do they respond to this? Do they double down on the bunkers?
They are trying to, but the bunker mentality is literally killing them. There is a move toward what some analysts call digital sovereignty, where they try to build their own entirely closed internet and hardware ecosystem. But as we discussed, you can't build a modern computer from scratch without global supply chains. You just can't. You need the chips from Taiwan, the software from the West, the precision tools from Europe. So they are always going to have those vulnerabilities. The shift we are seeing now is from hard target to soft target intelligence. Israel realized they don't need to blow up the whole bunker if they can just wait for the target to step out for a breath of air, or if they can compromise the person bringing in the mail.
And meanwhile, the world is moving toward more transparent intelligence. We are seeing things now that used to be top secret being discussed on podcasts or posted on social media by open source intelligence accounts. The veil of secrecy is thinner than it has ever been.
It is. And that creates a secondary effect, which is the loss of deterrence through mystery. The IRGC used to thrive on the idea that they were this shadowy, invincible force. Now, they look like an aging bureaucracy that can't even keep a bomb out of a high-level guest house. That loss of prestige is arguably more damaging than the loss of the individuals themselves. It emboldens the domestic opposition and it makes their proxies, like what is left of Hezbollah, start to wonder if the Iranian umbrella is actually made of paper.
You know, it reminds me of what we talked about in episode 993, the orbital shell game. The IRGC spent billions hiding their missile cities from satellites, but they forgot that the people building those cities have cell phones. They forgot that the concrete has a chemical signature that can be detected from space. They are fighting a 20th century war of hiding against a 21st century reality of total visibility.
That is such a crucial point, Korn. You cannot hide in 2026. You can only camouflage or obfuscate. If your security strategy depends on your enemy not knowing where you are, you have already lost. Your security strategy has to depend on your enemy not being able to reach you even if they do know where you are. But in a world of hypersonic missiles and loitering munitions, reach is no longer the problem. The problem is the decision-making cycle.
So, if you are the head of the IRGC right now, what do? You are sitting in a bunker, you don't trust your guards, you don't trust your phone, and you know the Israelis have a digital map of the very room you are sitting in.
You probably start looking for an exit, or you become so paralyzed by fear that you stop being an effective leader, and that in itself is a victory for the other side. Decapitation isn't just about killing the person, it is about killing the function of the office. If the leader is too afraid to communicate, the organization stops moving. It is functional decapitation.
I love that term. It is like the organization becomes a body with a brain that refuses to send signals to the limbs because it is afraid the signals will be intercepted. The limbs just sit there, useless, while the body is picked apart.
And we are seeing that across the entire Iranian proxy network right now. The command and control is sluggish. Orders aren't being followed because people aren't sure if the orders are real or if they are coming from a compromised source. It is a total breakdown of trust. This is the ultimate second-order effect of the security failure. It is not just that one guy died, it is that no one knows who to trust anymore.
Let's shift gears a bit to the practical takeaways for our listeners. Obviously, most of us aren't being hunted by Mossad. But this idea of security theater versus actual security is something that applies to everyone, from small businesses to personal digital hygiene.
It really does. The biggest takeaway from the IRGC failure is that complexity is the enemy of security. The more complex your system is, the more layers, the more hardened tech, the more secret protocols, the more things there are to break. Most people think they are making themselves safer by adding more passwords or more apps, but they are often just creating more attack surface. If you have 10 different security apps, you have 10 different companies that could be compromised.
Right. It is the insider threat variable. In every security model, the human is the weakest link. You can have the best encryption in the world, but if you can be tricked into clicking a link or if someone can bribe your assistant, the encryption doesn't matter. We all need to audit our own security theater. Are you actually protecting your data, or are you just doing things that make you feel safe?
That's right. For the IRGC, the bunkers made them feel safe. But the bunkers were actually just a way to pin them down in one place. They traded mobility for perceived invulnerability, and it was a bad trade. For a regular person, maybe you are using a secure messaging app, but you have your notifications turned on so anyone walking by your phone can read your messages. That is security theater. You are using the high-tech tool but failing at the basic human level.
It is like that old saying, the most secure computer is the one that is turned off, encased in concrete, and buried at the bottom of the ocean. But it is also a completely useless computer.
Right, and as soon as you want that computer to do something, as soon as you want it to communicate, it becomes vulnerable. There is no such thing as absolute security. There is only risk management. The IRGC failed because they thought they could achieve absolute security through isolation. But isolation in the modern world is an illusion. You have to assume you are compromised and build your systems to be resilient anyway. That is the zero trust model.
I think that is a really profound point. The illusion of isolation. We are all connected, whether we like it or not, and the fortress is often just a very expensive cage. A cage that the enemy has the keys to because they helped build the locks.
So, Herman, as we look toward the future and we are getting close to that big 1000th episode, what do you think the next phase of this looks like? If the IRGC is fractured, does the regime collapse, or do they find a new way to adapt? I think we are looking at a period of extreme volatility. When a fortress state realizes its walls are gone, it usually does one of two things. It either lashes out in a desperate attempt to prove it still has power, or it implodes. Given the March 2026 strikes on their oil infrastructure, their ability to lash out is being severely curtailed. They are losing the sinews of war, as the old saying goes. Without the oil revenue, they can't pay the guards. And if you can't pay the guards, the security paranoia loop reaches its final, terminal stage.
It really feels like we are watching the end of an era. The era of the Shadow War is moving into the light. The technical superiority of the West and Israel has reached a point where the old methods of asymmetric warfare, hiding in the shadows, using proxies, just aren't working anymore. The shadows have been illuminated by AI and satellite constellations.
It is a new doctrine. We mentioned it in episode 1009, but it bears repeating. We have moved from containment to active degradation. The goal isn't to live with a hostile IRGC. The goal is to dismantle their ability to function, piece by piece, person by person, dollar by dollar. And the intelligence we have discussed today is the scalpel that makes that possible. When the fortress is breached, the psychological impact is often more damaging than the physical loss. The regime is realizing that they are transparent.
It is a brutal world, but it is one that is being shaped by very cold, very technical realities. Herman, this has been a fascinating deep dive. I think it is one of those episodes where you realize that the world is much more transparent than we like to admit.
It really is. And for those of you listening who want to go deeper into the history of how we got here, I really recommend checking out episode 962, The Architecture of Hatred. It explains why the Iranian regime is so obsessed with Israel in the first place, which provides the why to the how we discussed today. Understanding the ideological drive helps explain why they are willing to retreat into these bunkers despite the obvious risks.
Definitely. And if you've been with us for a while, maybe not for all 999 episodes, but for a good chunk of them, we would love to hear from you. We have been doing this a long time, and your feedback is what keeps us diving into these weird prompts. We're standing on the edge of a milestone here.
Yeah, if you are enjoying the show, please leave us a review on your podcast app or on Spotify. It genuinely helps other people find us, especially as we get ready for the big 1000th episode. We have got something special planned for that one. It is going to be a reflection on everything we have covered and where the world is headed as we move deeper into this decade.
We do. And as always, you can find our full archive in the contact form at myweirdprompts.com. Daniel checks that form regularly, so if you have a topic that is as deep and complex as this one, send it over. We love the technical challenges.
Just don't send it from a lead-lined bunker in Tehran. We might not get it, and even if we did, the metadata would probably get you in trouble.
Fair point. Before we wrap up, Herman, I was thinking about that behavioral pattern analysis again. If someone was tracking us, what would our signature be?
Oh, that is easy. A disproportionate amount of coffee being delivered to this house, a steady stream of technical journals, and the fact that you never leave the couch for more than 10 minutes at a time. The AI would flag you as a stationary biological asset with high caffeine requirements.
Hey, I am a sloth. It is in my nature. I am optimizing my energy expenditure. It is a survival strategy.
Right. And I am a donkey, so I guess my signature is just stubbornness and a loud voice. The AI probably has me flagged as a high decibel acoustic anomaly.
Well, at least we are predictable. It makes the security easier, I guess. If we ever go missing, they just have to look for the nearest espresso machine.
Or it makes us sitting ducks. But hey, we don't have any international warrants out for us, so I think we are safe for now. We are just two brothers talking about the world.
One more thing, Herman. Did you ever find out where Daniel got that old radio in the kitchen?
Why? You think it is a bug?
I am just saying, it has a very 70s Eastern Bloc vibe to it. It looks like something that would have been in a Stasi office.
Corn, you are getting paranoid. It is just a radio. I checked it myself.
That is exactly what a mole would say.
All right, let's go get some lunch. I am starving.
Fine, but I am checking the table for microphones first. And we are taking the long way to the bakery.
You do that. I will take a zigzag route, I promise.
Good man. This has been my weird prompts. I am Corn Poppleberry.
And I am Herman Poppleberry. Stay curious.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We will see you for episode 1000.
Goodbye.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show. My weird prompts